Okay, so hopefully, so this is a little bit experimental. I'm trying a different type of presentation this time. So hopefully you can see me in the bottom right-hand corner and the slides behind me. Maybe Elżbieta, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you are exposed in the front, and as a background, we can see your presentation.
And you can see the title, The Early Morning Show, Lecture 11, yes?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Elżbieta. And then I learned another function, which let me try and see if we can do this. It is possible to have the captions. Okay, just close this. Okay, so now I'm going to click on Show Captions. And I think you yourself, you have to click on something on your computer, but then with only a few mistakes, you should be able to see in text the different things that I'm saying. So I was wondering, perhaps for some of our colleagues who are not native speakers, this also might be a useful function. Okay.
And I confirm it works.
Okay, fantastic, good. Okay, so good morning, colleagues. Today, we're going to be continuing the topic of sales networking, and we're going to build a little bit on the first two sessions which we had earlier this month. Okay, good morning, Amber. I'll try and be very brief. In the very first session, I was saying that from a sales perspective, the best idea when it comes to a sales networking event, when you're going to a conference, an exhibition, some kind of possible situation where you're going to meet other people, is to focus on getting the meetings after the event. So if you go to a networking event, it's very important that you meet enough people, because only a certain number of them are going to be key decision makers. And your metric of success, 90% of it is what happens after the event. You use that event simply to scout around, to break the ice, to get acquainted with people. And then your real metric of success is how many post-event meetings you manage to get with those people, either face-to-face or by Teams. And the assumption is that only a proportion of those post-event meetings will then result in mandates. Of course, your chances of getting a mandate will also be higher if you have something to offer, some kind of value proposition, legal solution, legal product, not to just be plain vanilla. Needless to say, a very common mistake, well, two common mistakes to avoid is to do no preparation before a networking event, to work out who's there and what you can offer, and then to do no follow-up afterwards either. So those are the main mistakes to try and avoid. Then in the last session, what we were looking at was a little bit about, how do you get into a group of people? We take the Comet approach. How do you introduce yourself? We have an elevator speech. How do you build that conversation, make a good impression? How we need to talk less and listen more, basically, that we need to be interested rather than interesting, and to be asking open questions to make a good impression on these prospects that we're meeting. Today, we're going to go a little bit further. One of the things that I was discussing and that I thought would be very good to cover is, of course, it is possible to just come to a networking event and to wander around and to meet people. It's even better if you can do a presentation or having a speaking position. If you are able to do a presentation or have a speaking slot, you gain exposure to the entire audience. And this opens a lot of different possibilities. However, then from a sales perspective, there's also a ton of mistakes to avoid with public speaking at such networking events, and some best practices. Because in the same way, guys, that it's entirely possible to go to a networking event and realize 6 months later that nothing has happened, It's also possible to do a wonderful PowerPoint presentation, a 10-minute speech in front of hundreds of people who are very interested, and then also realize, a month or 2 months later that nothing has happened. So we're going to look at how do you monetize your public speaking. And then towards the end of the session today, we're going to look at how do you leave groups in networking? How do you politely excuse yourself, which can actually be harder than getting into a group? And then we're going to examine 3 different problems that you might encounter in your post-networking internal business development meeting. Ideally, I think that if you and some of your colleagues were going to go to some conference, for example, it would make sense to do a preparation meeting before to work out who's going to do what, who are the targets, what are our value propositions, what are going to be our metrics of success. So you do your pre-networking meeting, you do the networking event itself, and then afterwards, it would really make a lot of sense to come together and have a post-event meeting where we summarize what were our results, what worked, what didn't work, and where are we going to go from there. In the worst case scenario, if a networking event was totally useless from a sales perspective, if we found nobody interesting to speak to, nobody worth following up with, and nothing's going to happen, that's also cool. It means like next time, just don't go to that event, spend your time at some other event. But there are 3 different problems which I've noticed in law firms in their post-event business development meetings, and we're going to try to avoid these. So we know about what is the early morning show, hopefully. There are different objectives that we have, different ways that you can use this. And as usual, we have the 16 key concepts. I've kind of cheated on today's session. I've given you 17 because I think there are 2 very close concepts which kind of go hand in hand, and it might be easier to remember them together. So we're going to look at a little bit about mentality of networking. We're going to look at some different roles you can play, especially if you don't go to a networking event by yourself. It doesn't need to be as scary and horrible as turning up to an event by yourself, but then you need to be careful what roles you play with your colleague. You can bring a friend. Then we're going to look at the public speaking and the presentation aspect that you can do at a networking event and how to monetize it. And like I mentioned towards the end, how to leave groups and then problems to avoid in your post-event business development meeting. Yeah, I think that's the main point. All right, so I don't speak Arabic, but some time ago, when I was researching the different concepts of sales networking, I came across this. So this means basically health as hope. Yes, I understand that not everybody likes networking. And in the same way, not everybody likes public speaking. Some lawyers are terrified of public speaking and doing presentations. Some lawyers really loathe the idea of coming to some event where there are lots of unknown people. And if ahead of time, you're thinking with dread and horror about this networking event, it's going to put yourself into a really negative place. Maybe you would only go to that event because some managing partner has a very big stick and is going to beat you so that you turn up. I think health is hope. You have your health. This isn't such a big thing. You can survive this. You need to reframe the way that you're looking at attending networking events. If you're looking at this as a horrible burden, which is going to be embarrassing, uncomfortable, and just dreadful, then it might be, it might be quite unpleasant. You need to kind of clarify for yourself, what is it that you can get from this event? My emphasis, if I was working with you, my priority would be the post-event meetings that you get, because I want you to get these meetings. Some of these meetings become mandates and we make some money. So my bias would be, I want you to have commercial success by going to this event. I can understand that a lawyer or a partner might be not very enchanted about going to some different networking events if they don't have that. If you're just going there to be seen, for publicity, for awareness, it might seem like quite a waste of time, especially if you have a ton of billable hours a lot of work to do back at the office. I get the idea. So I would really focus on the metric of success. Meetings, mandates, money. That would be from a sales idea. But then also, what else can you get from this? What about curiosity? What about some of the different topics to discuss? Maybe there'll be some nice presentations. What about curiosity regarding the people? You know, could you meet some interesting people? Could you make some interesting people come there? You should have your 3 hit lists. You should have your list of current clients. You should have your list of ex-clients, everybody you worked with since university, and you should have your list of targets or ideal clients. Now, if you're expecting this event to be awful and uncomfortable, you could email some of your current clients, ask them if they're going to be there, ask them if they'd like to be there, invite them. You could recontact some of your ex-clients and say, hey, you know, there's this really cool event. I'm going to be there. What about yourself? You could think about some of your prospects and check if they're going to be coming there. So you can have a little bit of control over what's actually happening here. And of course, if you're uncomfortable, you don't even really have to come by yourself. You could bring a friend from your company. But in that case, you've got to be very careful not to make some different mistakes, which I'm going to go into in a minute. Just before we finish this topic about health as hope, also, I think you don't need to take yourself too seriously. We mentioned this in the previous broadcast. 99% of people are nice. It is unlikely that anyone is going to be horrible or rude or unpleasant to you. So take it with a little bit of humor. Look at this networking event as a specific kind of game, which adults play, and try and see what can you get out from it. If you really honestly think that there is nothing that you can gain from going to this event, then to be honest, I really wouldn't go to the event, quite simply, or I would explain to the managing partner why it's a bad idea. Try and find some event where you could have some interest or benefit to gain. Now, like I was mentioning, you could go with somebody and this can be a little bit less intimidating than turning up to a networking event by yourself. So let's imagine you're going to bring with you a wingman. So this means you're just going to bring one of your friends, one of your colleagues from your practice. That's okay, and that's allowed. The main mistake here to avoid is to end up just socializing with your friend. You could have a nice time, you can talk together, share some office gossip, and it can be totally commercially useless. It can be a total failure from a sales perspective. As long as you and your wingman or wingwoman, I suppose, as long as you both understand that your metric of success is to meet these different people, especially key decision makers. Maybe you have your hit lists and you're going to be measuring the good business cards to follow up with after the event within 24 hours to get post-event meetings, then it's fine to have a wingman with you. But a good wingman, you would both have your respective target lists. You both have your current and your ex-clients. The nice thing about bringing a wingman is any of the current or ex-clients that you guys meet, it's a potential cross-sell for the other colleague. So that's kind of wonderful. You should have defined complementary value propositions. So if you're both real estate lawyers, I don't see too much value in that. However, maybe one real estate lawyer has a value proposition regarding land use planning and some different propositions there. And maybe the other one has something to do with leases and tenants and difficult landlords. So you could have two real estate lawyers with the different value propositions where one would complement the other. You could have a very nice kind of combined synergy UVP, a tax lawyer and a corporate lawyer. You know, why not? You could define the roles that you're going to play. You know, it sounds a little bit funny, but maybe one person could be a little bit more devil's advocate and pointing out the pitfalls and the dangers and the risks of certain developments in real estate. And the other one is more opportunity, looking at the hidden wonderful things that we can help clients to achieve. So you can develop and clarify your roles, how you're going to work together, and you can have a really good wingman for going to this sales networking event. Needless to say, this is quite unusual to happen. You know, very often as lawyers, as partners, we simply don't do the preparation. So what you can end up with is someone who is called a wallflower. A wallflower, this is English vocabulary from, I don't know when, from a long time ago, last century or before, where you would have a dance. And then you would have the ladies in their big, beautiful dresses sitting along the wall in the dance hall, and they wouldn't do anything. They sit there looking like flowers, looking beautiful, and not dancing. So until someone asks them, maybe. So a wallflower means when a lawyer or a partner brings a colleague to a sales networking event, to a presentation, to a client negotiation, and that other person is just decoration. They say basically nothing. They do basically nothing. They're just there like a flower. They look nice. And this is kind of funny for me. Maybe I have a very specific sense of humor, but I see this happening with partners all the time. Partner goes to a client meeting and he or she brings two of the young lawyers with them, two of the colleagues. And maybe from a work shadowing perspective, this is good for exposure and for the youngsters to see the partner in action. But from a commercial perspective, these people are useless. They're not doing anything. They just sit in that negotiation silent, nodding wisely. And so they're this kind of beautiful entourage. I think that's a missed opportunity. You do not want to go to a sales networking event, even if you're very senior, and bring someone who's just going to be a wallflower. You should put some responsibility onto them to be a wingman. If it's a junior person, you know, give them some research to do. Help them or ask them to work out who are our targets going to be. Ask them to do research into the companies of the prospects that we're going to meet, working out what would be the value propositions to be proposing. So avoid having a wallflower, have a wingman. Quite simple. And again, guys, like I mentioned before, it's really a pity that we don't have it very easy to have spoken communication here. If you have a question, put it into the Q&A box. Or even we can try it as an experiment, put a question into the Q&A box and I can try and unmute you. I'm not sure if it works for everyone, like I did with Elżbieta, and we can discuss. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, it can be quite nerve-wracking for a person to go to a networking event. It's not a bad idea to have a prop. You can hold something in your hand while you're at that event. So very obvious one is a cup. Don't know if you can see that, or a glass. And that gives you a little bit of confidence that you have something to hold on to. In terms of body language, you know that you cannot be defensive and have your folded arms. You can't have your hands in your pocket. And God forbid, you mustn't be playing with your telephone. You know, you need to be giving your attention to the audience, to the people, and to those that you're speaking to. So you can have a prop. That'll give you something to hold on to, and it can help you to feel a little bit more confident when you're at this event. Now, a prop might be especially useful if you have to take the opportunity to have a speaking slot. If you have this opportunity, fantastic, take it. If you have a 10-minute speaking slot, this can double or triple your conversion ratio from an event. But of course, if you're going to be doing speaking, it's very important to speak with passion and enthusiasm, to look like you're happy to be there, and not to speak like flat champagne. So sometimes I've seen this happening, especially in some of the Eastern European countries where I was working. A lawyer or a partner can do a very serious presentation, and it's very, very much in a monotone, and it's legally sophisticated, but it's kind of unemotional and dull. Don't sound like flat champagne. You have to be smiling. You have to be enthusiastic. You have to be passionate. To some degree, it doesn't even matter what you say. A lawyer who sounds very enthusiastic and motivated and keen on what they're saying is more likely to stimulate that response from the audience than a lawyer who is saying very sophisticated legal things, but in a very flat champagne kind of way. So enthusiasm and passion. you need to sell the idea to yourself first. Whatever you're going to talk about, you need to understand why it is cool and awesome and exciting, and then to show that enthusiasm to your audience. It doesn't need to be very legally sophisticated even. Now, if we take a step back, we can begin to look at the different type of conversion ratios that you could expect from different events. On the worst level, if a lawyer goes, let's say, by themselves or with one of their friends, and they simply socialize, they might meet 3 different people. Of these 3 people, there's nobody worth following up with. They get no mandates, they make no money. So socializing, it can be fun, but it's not very clever from a sales perspective. On the other hand, a lawyer who's a little bit more sophisticated, they might actually meet 10 different people, and they might follow up with one of them, you know, within 24, 48 hours, hopefully. And they sent off one email, but probably it would be a generic email saying how their law firm is a full service law firm and they're really cool and they're really nice, and to come back if anything can be useful, and therefore they get no meetings, make no money. Unprepared networking, this is what we looked at the last time. You get 10 business cards, 3 of them are good for follow-up. You follow up, you get 2 post-event meetings, absolutely fantastic. And one of these leads to a mandate. So I think that would be an example of sales networking, although it's not optimal. Okay, now I'm trying to show the conversion ratio here. I'm thinking of one event that I'm going to be going to in London in May. So there's a specific legal network. They invited me to be a speaker. So I have a half-hour slot at this event, which is very nice. I have to talk about all this business development magic. So I'm going to do public speaking at the event and networking and systematic follow-up. I know that there's going to be about 100 managing partners there. I'm going to follow up with all of those 100 managing partners because that's my target audience. I would expect that probably half of them will speak to me, and probably 2 out of 3 will then engage me in some kind of capacity. Maybe I'm being overly ambitious, but what I mean to say is that with preparation and with the public speaking and the follow-up, you can increase your conversion ratios quite significantly. And again, when you have the chance to do a presentation, even if it's a 10-minute slot, you know, I would think to yourself, this is like a possibility 3. This is a fantastic, wonderful opportunity for you to speak on a topic and to show you not just your knowledge, but your interest and enthusiasm and your excitement about this specific topic. You know, why should people care? What are the terrible pitfalls or disasters that they should avoid from this legal regulation or development? What are the opportunities, the chances that they can grasp through this? So you should look at this as being a possibility 3. You have a lot of flexibility and creativity during that 10-15 minute slot to talk about whatever you want, and then to have the call to action, whatever you want. In the same way that you need to be very creative to create an engaging title, so people will want to hear what you're going to say, you need to make sure that you have engaging content. So have some fun with this. And when you're speaking to the audience, you understand that eye contact and body language is extremely important. Whatever you do, do not read a script. Whatever you do, do not hide behind a lectern. You can have your prop in your hand, but you need to make eye contact with the audience. Now, one really cool thing is that even if you're in front of an audience of a few hundred people, you can choose 3 or 4 or 5 noticeable people at different places in the audience. And as you're talking, talk, 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 your eye jumps from one, and then talk, 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 it jumps to the other and to the other. So you can have this kind of circle, this eye jumping around the audience. And because your eyes are like a cone, your vision is like a cone, everybody near to that person will also be thinking that you're actually speaking to them. So eye jumping engages the entire audience. And it makes it much more enthralling for them to be listening to you, much more than if you're presenting, God forbid, to a PowerPoint. That's a bad idea. Or if you're just kind of looking ahead or presenting to one person. So don't forget the eye jumping. And when you're speaking at this event, you need to, while you need to have passion and enthusiasm, you need to speak like a train. You're going to be smooth and steady, and you don't need to speak too quickly. There are a couple common mistakes that you can make in your public speaking in the networking event. You might that's called the mistake. You need to not do that. How to avoid doing it? You slow down. You have your bullet points and you slow down. You can take a break. You're allowed to take an emphatic pause, take a sip from your coffee. And don't make the mistake. And you mustn't have pregnant pauses where you put a full stop in the middle of a sentence trying to translate some word or expression. Not a good idea. Emphatic pauses are good. Pregnant pauses are bad. You don't need to have really sophisticated, wonderful grammatical structures and fancy vocabulary. In fact, probably the simpler the structures and the simpler the vocabulary, the better. So you need to speak like the train and avoid the mistake. And then another huge mistake that I see especially lawyers doing is when they do a presentation or public speech, they basically do a very brief introduction, then a huge part of the body of the speech, and then they say thank you. That's not good. You need introduction, body, conclusion. I'll say, I'm saying, I've said. Tell the audience what you're going to be telling them. Explain to them why it's important and cool and fantastic. Then you tell them about it, and then you summarize and you show what you've said. If I was going to do public speaking with you, this would be one of the most common mistakes. That you have a one-sentence introduction, and then at the end you say something like, thank you for your attention, goodbye. That's not a conclusion. So you need to have, I don't know, 5–10% of your time for your intro, 5–10% of your time for your conclusion. And it's very smart if you can tie your introduction with your conclusion. One of the worst ways to begin a public speech is to say, hello, my name is such and such. I'm a lawyer at this company, and I will tell you about tax litigation. Immediately, you've lost the interest of the audience. Begin the presentation with a hook. You start before you even introduce your name and your position. You tell them a story. You begin to tell a war story. You tell them a statistic. You begin with a provocation. You hook their interest. Then when they're thinking, what the hell's going on? Who's this crazy person? What are they talking about? They're listening to you, though. They put down their telephones and they're listening. Then once you've done your intro, a war story, your provocation, this hook, then you can do your self-intro, body, conclusion. And at the end of the conclusion, you come back to that initial war story or hook, and you conclude it. This very nicely encapsulates what you're saying, and it makes it clear for the audience that you finish. Of course, the two most important parts of a public speech are a strong beginning, that you had with your war story or hook or provocation, and then coming back to it, it reassures them, they understand how it's finished. You know, sometimes with a public speech or a presentation, it isn't really clear that anything has finished or what the conclusion was, and that doesn't make a very good final impression. You can do like motivational speaking. There's a structure called building dreams. And in this structure, there are 5 steps to your speech itself. Okay, so you have your hook. Then you begin with some kind of story. You have your you begin with some problem. You begin with something negative. Then you tell them the solution to that problem. Then after that, you get them to visualize the future, and then you have your call to action. So you have hook, problem, solution, visualization of the beautiful future, and call to action. Tell them what to do. Again, if you don't have a call to action at the end of your presentation or your speech, then your take-up or your engagement will be so much lower. You miss an opportunity. So you can use the structure of building dreams. I have different paper about these kind of speech structures. So if you're interested, you can email me. It's possible to do even an hour or several hours training just on that very one topic. A different approach, which I like in terms of an engaging and motivational speech, is simply called the moon and the stars. So in this case, you have your beginning, your middle, and your end. The beginning, you show them where we are. The middle, you take them to the moon. You show them this is where we can aspire. And then you show the bigger picture, because then we head to the stars. So this is very motivational, very engaging, very optimistic, very positive. So you have a lot of positive vibes when you're doing this one. And you show them the moon and stars. Such an inspirational structure will be much more engaging for an audience than hearing about the pros and cons of a tax legislation. You know, you need to put it into the bigger business context of helping companies to be going where they want to go. I don't think very many directors care a lot about changes to tax legislation, but if it impacts them on how they're going to increase market share, get dominant position, make a ton of money, then they might be more interested. So that's the moon and stars. When you've done your public speech, you make sure that you have a good call to action. You keep it short and sweet. The best speech is a short speech. I can't imagine how someone would do like a half-hour speech, kind of like what I'm doing now, but that's training. So perhaps 5-10 minutes is enough. And then you have your call to action. Then you come down and you speak to the various people in the audience. But sometimes you need to escape from people, and that can be difficult. So the easiest way to escape from a person or a group is simply called the direct escape. You say, it was very nice speaking to you. Thank you very much, and goodbye. And most people understand that. On the other hand, if they don't understand that, a different way of escape would be you ask them if there's somebody they would like to be introduced to. If you know this person, you introduce them and you can escape. Or if not, you say, let's go and find this person together. A different way of escape is called the gallant escape. You do something nice before you leave them. So this one, I remember this one I came across when I was in Russia. So let's say you're a man and you get the other person, let's say it's a lady, you get her a glass of champagne, you get her some food, and then you run away. You do something nice before you leave. You try to leave on a high point. If that would be weird and nothing else works, you don't need to abandon the person. If you realize that your 10 minutes are up, you know, we remember the 10-minute rule, then what you can do is take them. You just take them. You say, hey, let's go and see what these people are talking about at the buffet. Take them, go to a larger group, and it then might be easier to escape. Now, after the networking event, hopefully you have your set of business cards. Hopefully you met a lot of nice key decision makers that you should follow up with within 24 to 48 hours. You have your post-event meeting. The post-event meeting can have a number of problems. So let's imagine we have 2, 3, 4 other lawyers who were at the event, and you have your post-event meeting, like a business development meeting. What I saw, I have to be careful how I express this. What I saw happen quite often, not just with sales networking post-event meetings, but also with business development meetings in general, is what I call fluff. People just talk about some kind of nonsense, in my opinion. They talk about the conversations they had, they talk about the legal work that they're doing, they talk about this, that, and everything, but not the matter at hand. Our objective was very simple. Our objective was to get the good meetings, because we're doing the follow-up, because we want to get post-event meetings. So be careful that a colleague doesn't begin to talk about some kind of random nonsense in your post-event meeting. Typically in a business development meeting in a law firm, fluff would be, let's imagine, like I saw this happen a few times. Let's imagine you have different representatives from different practices or different countries, and you're in your Teams call, and we're talking about the business development that we did in the previous month. That would include some different sales networking events. And one of the lawyers starts talking about current client work, about the mandates they've been doing, about their clients, about changes to legislation. That's fluff. We don't care. Do not tolerate that. You know, fluff is a waste of time. And I've been in many business development meetings which were 100% fluff. Each lawyer talks about legal things they've been doing as current client work, and then the next and the next and the next. Waste of time. That isn't a business development meeting. So if you're a managing partner, or if you're a lawyer who actually wants to do business development, pay attention to fluff and don't tolerate it. We've got to be very focused on what we're doing and why we're doing it. Personally, fluff, it annoys me so much, because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Another problem, which I found really shocking, and I saw this happening in some large international business consultancies, is when we have a business development meeting, a post-networking event, and we take it in turns to talk about what we've done, who we spoke to, and then someone says something like, oh, I have nothing to say. I've been kind of busy, lots of legal work. And then if you're the chair of that meeting, if you're a managing partner or a partner, it is extremely bad to tolerate and accept that. Because if someone says they've got nothing to say, other people realize it's not serious, and it sets a terrible precedent. And personally, maybe I'm being a little bit too Anglo-American here in terms of self-promotion, in terms of internal sales. I found it shocking and disturbing that some of the lawyers could allow themselves to say something which I consider so stupid. You have the opportunity to promote yourself, to show that you're thinking, you know, proactively, you're energetic, you're trying to do something, you want to bring success, you want to help the company, you want to help your colleagues, you're doing this business development stuff. And then you can allow yourself to say, I have nothing to say for that entire previous month or that entire event. You know, isn't that kind of embarrassing? How can you do that? So again, maybe I'm being a little bit too cruel. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh. Perhaps some colleagues are a bit shy or introverted. So we need to encourage them. So maybe, yes, I should have a little bit of a more polite, softer approach. Maybe you need to encourage them. No, you have this opportunity. You're at this networking event. You had this previous period of time. You really should be doing something. Be nice, you know, to tell us what you're doing or what you want to do as well. So again, fluff is a very common situation in such events or BD meetings. And then another one is this non-engagement. We shouldn't accept it. If someone is going to have nothing to say, then don't send them to future networking events, quite simply. And maybe this isn't good that I'm finishing on such a bad point. A bad apple. You might find that somebody in the team hates business development. Somebody loathes sales and marketing. They don't like the networking events and they're in a bad mood. And they're going to be negative. They're going to be defeatist. They're going to say that our brand is fine. Our company is fine. We need to do business development. They're going to be very contrarian. If you have a bad apple in a barrel, the bad apple spoils and it spoils the good apples. So, you know, if someone is talking fluff, if someone has nothing to say, that's maybe just a little bit kind of apathetic and lazy or foolish. Someone might even be quite negative. If you're going to do the business development meeting, the sales networking meeting, that's really, 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 really bad. You need to speak to the person individually. You need to find out their motivations. You need to help them to reframe how they see things and what they're doing. And in the worst case scenario, you mustn't have a bad apple because that's going to spoil everything from everyone else. Maybe, okay, but guys, you know, I have the experience. I've been to lots of business development meetings. I'm sure you have as well. So I don't want to be too cynical or negative, but these are 3 outcomes in the post-event meetings that I come across, and it's something to be careful about. Then maybe to finish, because I've gone over time again, so just 1 minute and we'll go into the questions and answers. Then last session, a really nice idea. So let's hope we don't have fluff and apathy and bad apples in your post-event meeting. Another idea which we kind of came across last time, so I formulated it into a pictogram. One activity is intros and asks. In a post-event meeting, you make a list of the 10 people that you met, your colleague and the other colleague, they make a list of the 10 people that they met. Maybe only 2 or 3 of them are good for them to do follow-up with. Now, let's look at the other, 7 or 8 that they have. Look at it from 2 perspectives, cross-selling. Can we suggest to these people intros? Can we say, hey, it was nice meeting you at this event. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Thomas from competition law, because, and he has a value proposition. So maybe that person isn't good for you to follow up with, but you could try and cross-sell them to one of your colleagues. And that increases the chance that somebody from the firm will engage that prospect. And of course, if your friend Thomas is doing the same thing, maybe he met some people who he can kindly cross-sell to you. Do not do cross-selling by email. You have to spend the time to make it a T for 3. It won't work very well if you do this by email. So you mustn't try and economize time there. And on the other hand, you can think of asks. You have your 10 people that you met. Let's look at it from active referrals. Who could we ask them to bring with them to a tea for 3? So maybe you met that junior HR manager. You could write to them and say, hey, let's have a tea for 3, bring along the HR director because I have a very nice employment solution I'd like to present. So don't simply look at your list of 10 prospects, let's say, in terms of who can you meet, and it's only 3, and then you throw away the other 7 cards, like I mentioned before. Look at it in terms of intros and asks, and do this as a group activity in your post-event meeting, and there's more chance you'll be able to leverage the meetings that you all got to get some other approaches. And finally, you might be able to combine an intro and an ask. So you're a corporate lawyer, you met a junior HR manager, you tell them, bring along the HR director, their boss, because you can see that on LinkedIn, because you connected to them on LinkedIn, and you bring along your friend from employment law. So that's an intro and an ask at the same time. That's you doing tea for 4. That's a cross-sell and an active referral at the same time. You go to lunch with that person that you met at the event, they bring their colleague, you bring your colleague, and there's a chance that these 2 colleagues will get together and work. So intros and asks is a nice activity. And again, very few law firms or lawyers look at the networking from that kind of perspective. Okay, I've gone way over time, 40 minutes. So there's some different next steps. I'm happy to share this presentation with you if you want it. And then in terms of my future in-person visits, so like I mentioned before, later this month, actually next week, I guess, the week after next, I'm in Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. Then I go on the Baltic tour, the Baltic states, Poland, and Finland. We have a few other different visits in February, and I recently just booked myself for Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Belgium at the end of the month in March. So if I'm going to be around in any of your cities, your countries, and you want to meet, you want to have a coffee, you want to talk, then that's where I'll be. So that's enough of my lecture about sales networking for today. Next week, we'll continue and we'll conclude. There is some more, and there's some other activities going into further detail about post-event and looking at some of the different strategies you can have post-event. We've done a few basic things, saying that post-event meeting is a good idea inside the firm, to be careful of fluff and nothing to say and bad apples. And we looked at the one simple activity of intros and asks. We can make this more sophisticated and take it further.